The transmission from Earth came unexpectedly, disrupting the calm of the Galactic Council's main chamber. For decades, the galaxy's peaceful races had maintained a tentative but stable balance. No one had expected Earth to become a focal point. Humans, after all, were still considered primitive by galactic standards, limited to their own solar system, their reach confined to rudimentary interplanetary travel. But all that changed in an instant. The message was cryptic, a single line of text. "We're not interested in your peace." The Council's representatives, an assembly of dozens of species from across the galaxy, stared at the screen in stunned silence. The message was blunt, almost defiant. No introduction, no formal greeting. Just a challenge. And that was enough to set off alarms across the Council chambers. Captain Lucas Hart, a former Earth soldier who had defected to the Galactic peacekeeping forces, stood at the back of the room, watching the unfolding chaos. His hands were clenched behind his back as he waited for someone, anyone, to speak. Finally, the first voice broke the tension. "This cannot be a mistake," said High Commander Varys, a towering four-armed creature from the planet Sarnak. His voice crackled with urgency. "This isn't the kind of message a primitive species would send. This is a declaration of hostility, or worse, perhaps a misunderstanding," suggested Counselor Ilara Vale, an elegant, silver-skinned diplomat from the Aurelian Collective. "Humanity's communication methods are crude. They may have not intended such aggression." But as she spoke, her own voice faltered. She had read the reports, of course, the failed diplomatic missions, the attacks on alien ships that had come too close to Earth, the countless skirmishes with explorers and smugglers alike. It was all too clear now. The humans weren't merely reactive. They were preemptive. They had been warning everyone from the moment they reached space that they would not be controlled. Lucas Hart stepped forward from the shadows, cutting through the rising murmurs. His gaze was cold, his posture rigid from years of military training. His Earth uniform, now adorned with the insignia of the Galactic Peace Corps, was a stark reminder that he had once been on the front lines of humanity's brutal expansion into the stars. "The humans don't understand your peace," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years spent navigating both human and alien conflict. "To them, peace isn't a guarantee. It's a vulnerability, and they won't allow themselves to be vulnerable. Not again." The chamber fell silent. Hart's words echoed in the air, heavy with truth. There was no misinterpreting the humans' intent. They weren't interested in joining the galaxy's fragile peace. They wanted something else, something far more dangerous. "We're not interested in your peace," Hart muttered under his breath, repeating the message. He could already hear the unmistakable undertone of human defiance. And in that moment, he knew the galaxy had made a grave mistake. The humans weren't just another species. They were a force. The Aurelians had been the galaxy's most trusted diplomats, peaceful, graceful, and renowned for their ability to broker deals between even the most hostile of species. The Galactic Council had chosen them to make first contact with humanity, believing their serene presence would ease the Deathworlders into galactic cooperation. But the Aurelians, for all their wisdom, had underestimated one critical factor. Earth's bloodthirsty reputation was no myth. Captain Lucas Hart stood on the observation deck of the Aurelian diplomatic cruiser as it approached Earth. The sleek, silver vessel glided silently through the void, carrying the esteemed delegation to a planet that had already sparked rumors of brutality in the Council. Hart, however, wasn't here for diplomacy. He was here to ensure the Aurelians didn't make the same mistakes others had made in their dealings with humans. And from what he'd learned of humanity, the first mistake was always assuming they were like anyone else. As the cruiser entered Earth's orbit, Hart's communicator buzzed. It was a message from the Council. "Proceed cautiously, Captain. We expect peace." He let out a low sigh. He had no faith in that directive. Humans had been nothing but unpredictable from the moment they'd stepped into the galactic stage. Their aggression toward other species was legendary. No one knew why, but the consensus was that it wasn't a matter of diplomacy. It was a matter of survival. And right now, Earth was as far from peaceful as you could get. The Aurelians opened communication channels with Earth's government, their usual calm voice echoing across the wide frequencies. The words that followed were scripted, diplomatic, and measured. They spoke of cooperation, peace, and mutual understanding, hoping to reach Earth's leaders before misunderstandings turned into violence. But something went wrong. Without warning, a sudden harsh transmission cut through the Aurelian signal, a low-frequency roar followed by static. A human voice, sharp and grating, rang out from the other side. It was loud, unrefined, and utterly dismissive. "You've got one chance. One. Turn around and leave, or we'll make you regret it." Captain Hart's blood ran cold. He knew exactly what that tone meant. It was a direct threat, not from a rogue faction or a single disgruntled commander, but from an entire species. Before anyone could respond, an enormous flare of energy erupted from Earth's atmosphere, barely a second of warning before a massive electromagnetic pulse ripped through the Aurelian cruiser's systems. The diplomatic vessel shuddered as its delicate electronics fried under the intensity of the pulse. The crew scrambled to regain control, but it was clear they had been completely caught off guard. The Aurelians had assumed peace, and humanity had shown them nothing but violence. "Open fire," came the order from the ship's commander. But it was too late. Human forces were already responding. More pulses of electromagnetic energy cut through the void, ripping apart any ships that came too close to Earth. What had been intended as a diplomatic envoy had become an attack in mere seconds. Hart watched in stunned silence, realizing that humans weren't interested in peaceful coexistence. They had just sent a clear message. Earth would defend itself at any cost. And to the galaxy, that was a very dangerous thing. By the time the Aurelian ships finally managed to retreat into deep space, the damage was done. The message to the Galactic Council had been loud and clear. "We don't want your peace," and humanity had made sure the galaxy heard it. Lucas Hart's expression remained grim. The humans had won this round. But the real question was, how long before their kind of violence reached a breaking point, and the galaxy had no choice but to fight back. In the aftermath of the Aurelian debacle, the Galactic Council called an emergency session. The council chamber was heavy with the scent of apprehension as representatives from dozens of species, each with their own notions of peace and diplomacy, tried to wrap their minds around what had just occurred. They were not dealing with just another species of warmongers. They were facing something more insidious, something more dangerous. The humans were unpredictable, yes, but they were also highly resilient, too resilient. Captain Lucas Hart stood at the back of the chamber again, watching as the council debated the best course of action. But he knew that their reactions were too slow, too cautious. It was clear to him that they weren't seeing the full picture. Humanity wasn't just a threat because of their ability to fight. It was their adaptability that terrified the galaxy. They survived on a world so hostile to life that no other species would even consider settling there, let alone thrive. And yet, humanity had done just that. Earth's ecosystem, Hart began, his voice cutting through the murmurs of discussion, is a death trap. It's filled with predators, extreme environments, and hazardous climates, more so than any known world. But the humans, they don't just survive, they dominate. Every time they face extinction, they adapt and overcome. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room, meeting the eyes of several council members who looked unconvinced. You think their military is the danger, but that's not it. The danger is their ability to endure, their capacity to adjust, to fight when they should have perished. That's what makes them a problem. And we haven't even begun to understand the full extent of what they're capable of. Hart could feel the weight of their disbelief, but he knew it was only a matter of time before they saw the truth. Humans had already begun to explore their own solar system, and their influence was expanding rapidly. But what made them truly dangerous wasn't their technology, it was their minds. They didn't stop thinking, even in the most extreme conditions. The Council's data streams began to show the horrifying truth. Humans had developed technology that enabled them to thrive in hostile environments. They had colonized moons that no one else had dared to even land on. Mars, the gas giant Titan, even the asteroid belt. Humanity had left its mark on every inhospitable corner of their system. Where other species would perish from radiation, extreme gravity, or scarce resources, humanity found ways to survive and even prosper. The implications were clear. A species that could survive the extreme conditions of their homeworld and then use that same tenacity to expand across their system could not simply be ignored. They would eventually make their way to the stars, and when they did, they would bring their relentless will with them. Captain Hart leaned forward. Humans don't just fight because they can. They fight because, in their blood, survival is a non-negotiable. That's something the galaxy doesn't understand, and it's something we should all be afraid of. His words hung in the air, and for the first time, the Council members began to realize the full scale of the threat. The galaxy had never encountered a species like this, one that didn't just endure, but excelled in the face of destruction. The Council knew they had to act, but the question remained, how do you stop a species whose very nature was to never back down? The Galactic were one of the oldest and most feared military powers in the galaxy. Their history was written in blood, their tactics refined through centuries of war. A ruthless species known for their precision and relentless pursuit of victory, they had conquered countless worlds, leaving only dust and fire in their wake. When the Galactic Council sought a way to deal with humanity's unpredictable aggression, the Galactic seemed like the perfect solution, a highly trained, battle-hardened force capable of crushing even the most dangerous of foes. The decision to invade Earth was made swiftly and without hesitation. The Council's military advisors reasoned that if any species could break the human will to fight, it was the Galactic. They believed that Earth's raw violence, though formidable, could be neutralized with brute force. It was a calculated gamble, a demonstration of power meant to put humanity in its place. The Galactic fleet, massive and imposing, set its course toward Earth with the expectation of an easy victory. But the Galactic made a fatal mistake. They underestimated humanity's ability to adapt. As the fleet approached Earth, Captain Lucas Hart was given command of a small Earth resistance group tasked with gathering intelligence on the incoming Galactic assault. What they uncovered was chilling. The humans were not preparing for a conventional defense. Instead, they were preparing to outlast their attackers, using guerrilla tactics and knowledge of their own environment to neutralize the Galactic's technological superiority. The first strike came unexpectedly. Earth's military forces, led by a loose network of underground militias, began launching targeted attacks against Galactic supply lines and communication relays. Unlike other species, who might have folded under such a coordinated but primitive assault, the Galactic found themselves disoriented and confused. The humans' tactics were brutal but effective: hit-and-run attacks on ships, sabotage of energy systems, and cyber warfare that caused widespread confusion within the Galactic fleet. It was the perfect strategy against an enemy that relied too heavily on their own strength. But it was Earth's survival instincts that truly set the tone. The humans had long been accustomed to fighting on the edge of extinction. When they faced overwhelming odds, they didn't retreat. They dug in deeper. They adapted. The Galactic, accustomed to crushing inferior species with overwhelming force, found themselves constantly on the back foot, unable to predict the next human move. As the battle raged on, the Galactic suffered loss after loss. They had underestimated the Deathworlders in every conceivable way. Not only did humans have the physical ability to withstand extreme conditions, but they were also willing to take risks that other species wouldn't even consider. They fought not just for survival, but for pride, an instinct that no military calculation could predict. The breaking point came when a small group of human warships, outfitted with jury-rigged technology, launched a surprise strike on the Galactic flagship. The attack was simple but effective. using Earth-made EMPs to disable the flagship's shielding systems, allowing human forces to board and disable the ship from within. The flagship fell. The Galactic fleet, once so sure of their superiority, scattered in panic. Captain Hart watched from his command post as the human forces pushed back the Galactic, forcing them to retreat. It was a moment of astonishing triumph. A species that had been written off as primitive and dangerous had just repelled one of the galaxy's most formidable military powers. Humanity had proven something the galaxy hadn't understood before. When pushed to the brink, they didn't just fight. They found a way to win. As the Galactic limped away from Earth, humiliated and defeated, one question lingered in the minds of every observer. What would happen if humanity ever decided to go on the offensive? And could the galaxy survive such a reckoning? The Galactic's retreat was not just a military loss. It was a revelation. The full scale of the danger posed by humanity was now undeniable. In the days following the defeat, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session, with leaders from every corner of the galaxy arriving to discuss the implications. A once secure order was now in jeopardy, and the question on everyone's mind was the same. What do we do with Earth? Captain Lucas Hart sat in the back of the chamber, watching as the galaxy's most powerful representatives debated in urgent tones. For all their wisdom, all their advanced technology, none of them had fully understood the nature of humanity until now. They had assumed that their military might would be enough to suppress Earth's aggression, to bend the humans to the will of the greater galaxy. But Earth had shown them just how wrong they were. "It is clear," said High Commander Varys, his multiple arms clasped in a posture of controlled tension, "that Earth's military capabilities are beyond anything we anticipated. The Galactic are a formidable force, and yet they were driven from Earth by primitive tactics and relentless human ingenuity. We cannot allow this to continue unchecked." Councillor Ilara Vale, who had once advocated for peaceful engagement with humanity, now sat with her silver skin pale, her voice low. "The no-war policy must be enforced immediately. If we allow humanity to grow unchecked, if we allow them to spread beyond their planet, we risk more Galactic-style disasters. We cannot afford another confrontation with a species that refuses to be subdued." There was a murmur of agreement, but Hart could hear the faintest undertone of unease in the room. They all feared the same thing: humanity's potential to escalate. The Council turned its attention to the matter at hand: Earth's fate. They knew one thing for sure. The no-war policy, which had been previously a set of vague guidelines, now needed to be codified into law. It would no longer be a simple diplomatic suggestion, but a firm decree. Earth would remain under constant surveillance. No species, whether a peaceful envoy or a military power, could engage with Earth without explicit permission from the Council. Any attempt to invade, to provoke, or to wage war would be met with immediate retaliation. But even as they discussed this course of action, a deeper concern began to gnaw at the edges of their deliberations. A few councillors raised the question: what happens when humanity decides to challenge this new order? Captain Hart had seen it too many times in his years on Earth. The human spirit, once it was provoked, was a force that could not be easily restrained. A spark of defiance could ignite into an inferno. And now, with the Galactic's defeat hanging in the balance, it seemed only a matter of time before Earth's leaders began questioning the legitimacy of their isolation. He stepped forward, interrupting the rising debate, his voice steady and resolute. "We've made a mistake. The no-war policy isn't just to protect us from Earth, it's to protect us from ourselves. Humanity doesn't want to be controlled. They never will. If we try to keep them in line, we risk pushing them into a conflict that none of us are prepared for." The Council paused, the weight of his words settling like a shadow over the room. The decision had been made, but Hart knew it wasn't enough to just impose restrictions. Humanity had to be understood, not feared. And yet, the galaxy had made one fatal error: it had never truly understood humanity at all. The decision was sealed. Earth would be placed under surveillance. A rigid no-war policy was enacted. But as the session adjourned, one question lingered in the minds of the council. Would humanity obey the rules? Or would they eventually rise up to break free from the chains the galaxy had placed on them? And if they did, would the galaxy be ready to stop them? The no-war policy was enacted swiftly, but it didn't take long for cracks to appear. The Galactic Council, with its blend of old guard diplomacy and political maneuvering, believed that isolating Earth from galactic affairs would be enough to prevent further conflict. But there were always factions within the galaxy that believed they could exploit Earth's potential for their own gain. The Krillian Vanguard was one such faction, an alliance of hardline military leaders from various species, united by their contempt for the Council's pacifism. The Krillians were ruthless in their approach to galactic power. They believed the Council's willingness to avoid conflict would only lead to more stagnation, and they saw Earth's rise as an opportunity to reshape the balance of power. The Krillian Vanguard was an elite military faction, with fleets strong enough to challenge the Council itself. They had long been frustrated by the restrictions placed on them by galactic diplomacy and had been itching for an excuse to throw off the chains of peace. Their plan was simple: provoke a war with Earth. They would invade a distant Earth colony on one of Jupiter's moons, Ganymede, and trigger a conflict that would force the galaxy to take sides. The Krillians believed that once the humans responded, they would be forced into a war of attrition. And after watching the Galactic fail, the Krillians were convinced that Earth would eventually buckle under the pressure. The Krillian fleet, a well-equipped force, jumped into Ganymede's orbit and immediately began deploying ground forces. They attacked the colony with surgical precision, aiming to capture key infrastructure, ensuring a swift victory that would send a clear message to the Council and the galaxy that no one was untouchable. But the Krillians had underestimated humanity in the worst way possible. Earth's response came within hours. A coalition of human military units, largely made up of ex-soldiers from various planetary colonies, immediately launched a counterattack. Captain Lucas Hart, now stationed on Earth after his years with the Peace Corps, was placed in charge of organizing Earth's military operations. The humans had been given a taste of their own power after the Galactic debacle, and now they had a real reason to act. The Krillian fleet, expecting Earth to cower or negotiate, found themselves under attack from every angle. The humans had not just prepared with conventional forces, they had anticipated a surprise assault, making use of their expertise in guerrilla warfare, psychological tactics, and technological improvisation. Earth's military may not have had the same advanced ships or technology as the Krillians, but what they lacked in firepower they made up for in sheer ingenuity. Using EMP pulses and hacking techniques that had been honed through decades of fighting on Earth's hostile surface, human forces scrambled Krillian communications, turning their ships into sitting ducks. The Krillians retaliated fiercely, but their advanced weaponry failed to counter the unexpected tactics of Earth's militias. Every engagement became a battle of wits, and Earth's soldiers, desperate and relentless, fought with an energy that no one could have predicted. Within 72 hours, the Krillians had lost nearly a third of their fleet. Their ground forces, isolated and disoriented, were decimated in a series of ambushes. The attack that was supposed to be a quick, strategic victory had turned into a humiliating defeat. Back in the Galactic Council chamber, the news spread like wildfire. The Krillians, once so confident in their superiority, were fleeing the scene in disarray. The humans had done it again, fought back against an overwhelming enemy, and come out victorious. As Captain Hart watched the Krillian ships retreat, his mind turned dark. It wasn't just the Krillians who had been caught off guard. The entire galaxy was still underestimating humanity's resolve. And worse, the Council's fragile peace was becoming increasingly irrelevant. How many more attempts would it take before Earth decided it didn't need anyone's permission to defend itself? And how long before humanity realized that it didn't need the Council's permission for anything at all? The galaxy was growing increasingly aware of one terrifying truth. Humanity wasn't just surviving. It was thriving in chaos, and sooner or later they would turn their eyes beyond their home world. And when that happened, no one would be ready for the storm. In the aftermath of the Krillian Vanguard's humiliating defeat, a chilling shift began to ripple through the galaxy. The once unified voice of the Galactic Council, which had seemed so confident in its ability to control the universe's most dangerous species, was now fractured. The threat posed by humanity had become undeniable. The counselors had underestimated Earth not once, but twice, and now their patience was wearing thin. But what terrified them even more was the growing realization that humanity wasn't just reacting to threats. They were adapting faster than anyone could anticipate. Captain Lucas Hart stood in the observation deck of Earth's new orbital command center, watching as fleets of Earth ships prepared for their first offensive beyond their solar system. It had been just over a decade since the Irillian envoy, and the changes in humanity's capabilities were staggering. No longer limited to defensive tactics or isolated military operations, Earth's expansion had begun in earnest. And it wasn't just a matter of territory, it was a matter of power. With the Krillian defeat still fresh in their minds, Earth's leadership had begun to rethink their position in the galaxy. What had started as a defensive posture, safeguarding their homeworld and its colonies, had evolved into a fierce desire to stake a claim in the stars. The humans had a point to prove, and after decades of being treated like outcasts by the galactic powers, they were now determined to show that they were more than just a wild, uncontrollable force. They were a power, and one that could no longer be ignored. The first major step in Earth's expansion came in the form of their bold foray into the Xarnax system. The Xarnax, known for their enormous strength and aggression, had been one of the first species to challenge humanity's growing presence. Their leaders had insisted on establishing military outposts near Earth's colonies, claiming that the humans posed a danger. In a move that took the Galactic Council by surprise, humanity sent a small but highly effective fleet to Xarnax space. It wasn't a full-scale invasion. Instead, Earth sent in what they called the Tactical Response Forces, a fleet composed of hybrid ships built from both human and salvaged alien technology. These ships had been engineered for one purpose: to outlast and outmaneuver their opponents using the same guerrilla tactics that had served them so well against the Galnaki and Krillians. In a stunning series of covert operations, the humans infiltrated Xarnak-controlled sectors, disabling key military installations with minimal bloodshed. The Xarnaks, who prided themselves on their invincibility, were caught off guard. Human tactics, however, were not designed for the glorious spectacle of open warfare. They were designed for survival. They didn't need to win the battle. They needed to ensure that they were still standing when the dust settled, and that was exactly what they did. By the time the Xarnaks realized they had been outmaneuvered, the humans had already secured critical supply routes and had established a network of highly strategic outposts within their territory. It wasn't conquest. It was the beginning of a new chapter in humanity's history. The Xarnaks, unwilling to acknowledge defeat but unable to reclaim what they had lost, grudgingly entered negotiations with Earth. And that was just the beginning. Humanity had now tasted what the stars could offer, and their ambitions were growing faster than the galaxy could keep up. As their fleets prepared to venture further into galactic space, the Galactic Council was faced with an inescapable truth. The galaxy would either bend to humanity's will, or humanity would carve its own path, one star at a time. Captain Hart couldn't help but feel a pang of unease. Earth was no longer just a survivor. It was a predator. And as humanity's expansion continued, the galaxy would have to decide whether it was ready to face that new reality, or whether it was already too late. It wasn't long before the Galactic Council found itself facing the most impossible choice in its history: submit or resist. Humanity's expansion was no longer a matter of distant possibility. Earth's ships had reached the edges of the Xarnak system, and whispers of human forces in the Elythian belt had begun to stir. The question was no longer whether humanity could be contained. It was whether the galaxy could survive their rise. The council had attempted every diplomatic maneuver at their disposal, but none had succeeded in curbing humanity's relentless drive. The no-war policy had already been violated once by the Krillians, and now Earth's expansion beyond its solar system threatened to undermine the fragile peace they had so carefully constructed. Some factions within the council pushed for an all-out military response. Others, like the Aurelians and the Farkathi, argued for negotiation, hoping to persuade humanity to join the Galactic Order peacefully. But Captain Lucas Hart knew better. He knew Earth wasn't a species that could be persuaded. Not now, not after everything that had happened. The humans were beyond diplomacy. They were building their own empire, one star at a time, with no intention of asking for permission. Hart had been part of the Council's brief foray into diplomacy with humanity, but he had grown disillusioned. He had seen the shift in the human spirit, the growing hunger for autonomy. Earth wasn't merely surviving any longer. It was forging a new identity. And if the galaxy couldn't understand that, it would never be ready for what was coming. In a closed session with high-ranking council members, Hart was summoned to speak on behalf of humanity. The chamber was dark, the only light coming from the holographic projections of the galaxy's myriad star systems. "Captain Hart," said High Commander Varys, his tone uncharacteristically soft, "we know what's coming. Humanity's strength cannot be denied. But what do you want from us? What do your people want?" Hart's eyes narrowed, his voice calm but filled with years of regret and understanding. "Humanity wants the same thing the galaxy wants, to be free. To carve our own path. You've never understood our nature, and now you never will. Earth doesn't need your approval. It doesn't need your peace. What you're seeing isn't a species that's asking for a place in your order. We're making our own." The council fell silent. There was no response. The truth was undeniable. Humanity was no longer content with being a single, isolated planet among 100,000 others. They were ready to claim their place in the stars. Hart knew the galaxy would try to resist, and he knew the cost would be high. The humans had fought wars of survival on their homeworld, but now they were about to fight a war of ambition, one where they would not stop until they had what they wanted. The choice was now clear. The galaxy could either accept humanity's rise and find a way to coexist, or it could face a future where humanity's will was the ultimate power in the stars. Hart turned from the council chamber's holo projection and stepped into the corridor. Earth had made its choice. Now, the galaxy would have to make its own. The stars were no longer a quiet place, and soon, humanity would show the universe what it truly meant to survive.